We were on chapter four, chapter
Well,
14.
welcome at our next try for chapter 16 of the Mesilat Yesharim, the path of the just. And we are studying today the trait of tahara, of purity. Okay. And I think this time we'll just agree that that's how to translate the word tahara, as purity. And, um, and I'm just going to Yeah. All right. So you're muted, but if you'd like to say something, just unmute yourself. So hatahara, the trait of purity, he tikon halevi amachshavos. It's all about your intentions, your heart. It's about how you think, why you do what you do. It's much more about that. It's only about that. It's not about the action, the specific action that you do. V'zeh halashon mitzanuhu eitzel David, and this language, this term, we find when David said, "Sha'amar leiv tahor biroli Elokim." When David prayed to God and he asked him, "God, dear, please create for me a leiv tahor, a pure heart." The inyana, and the purpose behind it is shelo yaniach ha'adam makom liyetzer b'ma'asav. Now the yetzer is a reference to our inclination to do evil, right? The yetzer hara, our human inclination for selfishness and to do what he or she wants to do for our own aggrandizement or pleasure, right? So a person leaving no place for this yetzer, for that selfish desire to have a place in the actions that we do, right? So, and what we're going to see as he develops this mida, this trait, is often we do things that on the surface are good things, and they may actually be good things, and they might be good for us to do them, but our intentions are not necessarily always the greatest. Eliyu call masav, all of a person's actions should be, remember, this is where we've progressed a lot through this book. We're moving up in the levels of greatness that we're trying to achieve. And and he's going to deal with the fact that this is something that not everyone is going to get here, but we can all still learn a lot from this and learn what we're striving for. So all your actions should be outside of chachma v'ayira. They should come from wisdom. You should think about what you're doing. Is this smart? Is this the right thing to do? And also yira, meaning awe, fear of God, humility. Am I doing this because it's the right thing to do, because and it's what God would want me to do. Below outside hachet v'atava, as opposed to doing it because of your desires, to fulfill your selfish desires. And this includes also the actions that we do that are not necessarily on the surface a mitzvah, not necessarily a good deed, but the things that we do, that are physical, totally physical traits. Even after he is acting in a way of prishut, which we had before, of staying away from things that are bad. He's already living a lifestyle where he only partakes of this world that which is necessary. You still have to work harder. There's a step beyond that, and that is to purify your thoughts, your intentions. Why am I doing what am I doing? That even in the little bit that we do indulge ourselves in this world, right? We should take lo yechaven el ha'anoah. His intention shouldn't be for the pleasure, v'atava klal elatia kavanoso el hatov, but his intention should be because of the good that comes from it. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. Or I'm doing this because it's a good thing to do. I'm eating because it's healthy, because it makes me strong. If you're enjoying something, then the pleasure of a person's, of other people's company, or the positive aspects of it, we do because it's good, because it's right, not because I feel good, or not because I get pleasure out of it, or not because of any selfish intention, right? So there's a fine line between these two things, and that's what Tahara is trying to get us to find, that fine line, and stay on the right side of it. Now, he's about to bring a story, which is going to kind of lead me on a little bit of an analysis of a Talmudic story, which I think some of you may find interesting. And One of the things that we've had this several times when issues of sexuality come up, and one of the general, the way the world thinks about sexual behavior, sexual activity, and sexual pleasure in general has changed a lot, right? Like if you were to ask a doctor 400 years ago, in the time when the Ramchal was writing this, is sex healthy or bad for you? The answer would have been it's bad for you, right? According to, in other words, they thought of it then as something that's bad for you. It takes away from, they thought that all kinds of things, which I don't need to go into it now, but you can read about, the medicine of Galen and the medicine of the medieval times. And of course, when you learn so it was the positive. Nowadays, you get a very different answer. We'd have a very different understanding, you know, of what sexual activity is like. And I would like to say that the approach that people had to sexuality in general affects how the rabbinic scholars over the ages learned and understood some of the basic sources in the Talmud, right? So when the way the Ramchal understood the Gemara that he's about to quote, I believe that Gemara, that Talmud, can be understood very differently, and I'm going to analyze it for you, and I'll explain what I mean. But before I do that, let me explain the way he understood this Gemara, and then you'll understand what he's saying. And it comes from a story in the Masechet Nedarim, which I'm going to read to you soon. I'll read to you from the Gemara itself, and then we'll analyze it together. But the story is about Ima Shalom, who's a famous woman who pops up in the Talmud a lot. She's the wife of Rabbi Eliezer, the famous rabbi from the Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer, and Ima Shalom was his wife. And as the story starts, and again, I promise I'll read it to you inside. The story starts when the rabbis asked her, "Why are your children so beautiful?" She has such beautiful children, and she said, and she gave an answer, which we're going to get to in a minute. I'm going to skip part of her answer. But one of the things she did was she described what her husband was like when they had sex, right? So, and the way the Ramchal understood this, and the way almost all rabbinic commentaries understand this Gemara, which I'm going to argue is strongly misunderstood, is that Rabbi Eliezer had sex in a way where he refrained as much as possible and made it as little pleasurable as he possibly could. So and like he did it as if he had to do it, not because he really wanted to. That's the way it's understood. Now, when I read through the Gemara itself to you, and I'm going to show you some points that I think, but if you come from the perspective that they had on what sex is supposed to be, and whether it's good for you, bad for you, how they looked at it in general, you'd understand why they understood the Gemara this way. So it says here, like they said regarding Rabbi Eliezer, and when he says they, means his wife said about him, that he would uncover a tefach, is a few inches of skin, and then cover two of these measurements of skin. So there's different understandings in the Rishonim of the commentaries in the Talmud. Some people understand this of his penis, right? So that he wouldn't even have full intercourse because it would be more pleasurable that way. Some people understand it that he only revealed part of her skin, so he only enjoyed his wife's body only a little bit. Like that. That's another way of understanding it. I'm going to tell you a completely different way of understanding it soon. But v'doma lemisha kifa'o shade. And he did his act as if he was being forced by a shade. He was being forced by a demon. And these words are the Ramchal's words, that he didn't have any pleasure from the act. He was doing it only because he was commanded to, and he was supposed to do it. And this is what Solomon said, in everything you do, you should know God, and he will straighten your path. So that's the way that piece of Gemara was understood. And this, we're about to go off into an area which is not directly the Mesilat Yesharim, but I want to do this because it's an intellectual exercise which I have went through in a lot of areas, and it comes up a lot when it comes to sexual things. So this Gemara actually comes from a famous Gemara that talks the Talmud, which talks about sex in general, and it's from the Masechet Nedarim, Daf Chaf, 20a and b. And the Gemara starts, and I'm going to skip this, but it starts with quotes from a whole set of rabbis which really tells you about all kinds of things that you shouldn't be involved in. It's very limiting as to what sex is considered okay, right? That you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do that. That's how the Gemara starts. But then it takes a significant turn and it concludes something very different. But before it makes that conclusion, it says, and one of the quotes was from Rabbi Yochanan ben Dahavai, which is a rabbi who doesn't come up very much in the Talmud, and it talks about people doing different practices like anal sex and things like that, and he very much denigrates all of these things. But then the Gemara asks a question. After it reads Rabbi Yochanan ben Dahavai, it says as follows, V'raminu, and we can ask a question that seems to not make sense. And one of the things that Yochanan ben Dahavai criticized when he was railing against all kinds of sexual practices was a husband and wife speaking to each other during sex. So the Gemara asks, Raminu, shalu et ima shalom. They asked once ima shalom. Ima shalom is a woman who pops up significant amount of times in the Talmud. There's lots of stories with her. And she was the wife of Rabbi Eliezer. Okay. So, and they asked, Banayach yifeifin biyoser, your children are so beautiful. And they said it as in the form of a question. So like, Amra lahen. So she said to them, Eino misaper imi, my husband doesn't, she used the language speak with me, but it was obviously meant to have sex with me, right? Lo b'tchilas halayla, not in the beginning of the night. Below b'sof halayla, not at the end of the night. Al b'chatzos halayla, rather in the middle of the night, right? So there's ways to understand why these times. So some people say in the beginning of the night, there's other people around, other people are awake, and they would hear. So, right, or in the end of the night, again, people are waking up in the morning. Because in those days, people might have lived in close quarters, but in the middle of the night is more modest. That's one way of understanding it. But there are other ways we can understand it. But then she says, "Ukishahu misaper," and when he has sex, migalet tefach umichaset tefach. He covers a tefach is like a measurement, a 4-inch measurement approximately, and he uncovers. Vidome alav, and it's like to him as if kimisha kifa'o shade. Now this is the key words here, as if he was forced by a shade. And now I already told you the way the Ramchal understood it, and the way most commentaries understand it, and the way they understand this uncovering and covering business, right? But then she says v'amarti lo. So I asked him, matam, right? Why is this? Why are you acting this way? And pay attention to his answer. And he said, because I never want to look at another woman, right? Because if I did that, then my children would be like bastards. In other words, because I want to only look at you. Now, if you understand the Gemara and the way that the Ramchal understands it, right? And in the way that almost all the commentaries understand it, and if you look at all the commentaries, they struggle to understand this last statement here, right? Because the answer should have been, if you understand the Gemara the way the Ramchal understands it, Rabbi Elazar's answer to his wife should have been, I'm doing this to avoid having sexual pleasure because I'm not supposed to have so much pleasure, right? Because that's how they understood the Gemara, but that's not the reason that the Gemara itself, nor Rabbi Elazar says, right? He says a completely different understanding, which is, the reason why I'm doing it is because I want to pay attention to you and no one else. In other words, he tried to make it into something intimate between them, right? My interest is in you, and I'm doing this in order to create more excitement about you. So then you have to look back at what is this megala tefach umechase tefach? What is this uncover and cover, uncover and cover? And what is this phrase here, v'dom elav kamisha kifa'o shade? He's acting as if he's being forced by a demon. Well, what's interesting is whenever you learn the Talmud, you should always think, does this term ever pop up anywhere else of kifa'o shade, of someone being forced by a demon, right? Does it ever show up anywhere? And the truth is, it's very, very rare for it to pop up anywhere, but it does in one other place. And it pops up in Mesechus Rosh Hashanah, which is talking about it was the main purpose there was discussing the laws of blowing the shofar, but it's also it has a question there. It's talking about when a person, whether we intentionally blow the shofar. Let's say you're blowing it for music. Can you do the mitzvah? Let's say you're blowing it because you like the way it sounds. Again, it's talking about the intentions that a person has. And then one of the questions is, and then somebody brings in the subject of eating matzah on Pesach. So now that Pesach's coming up, so it's appropriate to talk about this. And the question is, if a person eats matzah because he's being forced, shekifa'o, it's that he's being forced, the same word, right? Is he yotze, does he fulfill the mitzvah of matzah? In other words, let's say you sit down on Pesach and you don't eat matzah because you want to remember the exodus from Egypt, but you eat matzah because something's forcing you to do it. So then the Gemara asks, what do you mean? Like forcing, who's forcing it? Right? You know, and one of the things the Gemara says is kifa'o shade. Are you talking about, is he being forced by a demon? And then the Gemara says over there in Rosh Hashanah, but that's not a question, because we already know that if a person does something because out of craziness, right, out of like losing his mind, like in other words, not in a logical way, but doing it just out of just passion, right? So then he's not, that action is not considered intentional. So the Gemara is clear in Rosh Hashanah that the term kifa'o shade, right, means that a person is acting in such a way, right, that he's being passionate. He's not thinking. He's not being logically thinking through what I'm doing, but he's doing it with a passion, right? So that's the only other place in the Talmud where the word kifa'o shade means, right? So in other words, if you run into the house, I love matzah, I got to eat matzah, and matzah is the greatest thing in the world, and you, like cooking matzah or something, and you go, right? So that's kifa'o shade. That's a shota. That's crazy, right? Then if you do that, then you're not fulfilling the mitzvah of matzah, right? So the same thing would be here when it says kifa'o shade. It doesn't mean, right, that he was having, this is I contend this to be the case. I mean, that the Gemara means something very differently entirely. And when you read it the way I'm about to suggest, the whole Gemara makes so much more sense, because the Megala Tefach and Mechasa Tefach is he's kind of having a sexual foreplay with his wife, right? Covering her, not covering her, right? And why is he doing that? And he's acting like he's possessed with passion, right? That's the term shade. That's the way they used that term in those days, right? It was a person that was like possessed with a passion to do something, right? So she asked him, what's going on? And he says to her, because I care about you. You're attractive to me. I'm not arousing myself by thinking about other women. I'm arousing myself by being with you and by in bed. And then the answer makes so much sense. So now all of a sudden the dialogue in the Gemara makes sense. And the commentaries struggle to understand the dialogue because they automatically assumed, right, like the Ramchal assumed, that the Gemara meant something completely different. And now, see, and just to add to more, if we really look at the Gemara even more, it continues. The next thing is it says, so what was the question? But, the other guy, Rabbi Yochanan ben Dahavai, just said, you're not supposed to talk to your wife. So the Gemara says, don't ask this question. B'mili de tashmish, if you're speaking about things that are related to having sex, sexual talk between, that's appropriate, right? Then they should be doing that. But to sit while you're having sex with your wife and talk about the water bill that you have to pay tomorrow, that's not appropriate, right? So the Gemara all of a sudden changes from being something telling you about how you're not supposed to enjoy sex to being something to tell you that you're supposed to be paying attention to your partner. You're supposed to be paying attention to her and being turned on by her and discussing things with her that are mili detachmish, that enhance that moment, right? And then the Gemara continues by saying, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, says Rabbi Yochanan, Zu divrei Yochanan, all of this talk about the things that you're not supposed to do, that's the opinion of Yochanan ben Dahavai, and he doesn't even call him Rabbi Yochanan ben Dahavai. He calls him Yochanan ben Dahavai, with taking the title away. Aval Amru Chachamim, but the rabbi said, Ein halacha ki Yochanan ben Dahavai. That's not the way it goes. Anything that a man and a wife want to do together, they should do, and so on. and that's the conclusion. So now all of a sudden we understand the conclusion of the Gemara, right? Because the dialogue just makes so much more sense. All that being said, I wanted to go through this because it's really an analysis of the story in the Gemara, and I fully submit that I realize that the traditional commentaries don't explain it this way, but I think they're completely missed the boat. I think they totally missed the boat on what the Gemara is trying to say, and including the Ramchal here is missing the boat on what the Gemara is trying to say. But the point he's trying to make is still valid, right? And that is the idea that when we engage in things in this world, right, that are for our own physical pleasure, we need to have in mind, right, we're doing this because they're good, because they're appropriate, because they're proper, not because I want this and I need that and I have to, right? If we go on a vacation, right, we should enjoy it because it enhances our life, it enhances our experiences, it helps us work better, it helps us relate to other people better, it puts us in a better mood. There's all kinds of good reasons that we can enjoy things in this world, but not because I need, I want, I have to have, right? If that's it. So, and in that sense, the lesson he's trying to learn from the story is important, but I just think that he and most of the other commentaries on the Talmud, the traditional ones, just completely missed the boat. But I don't blame them because the attitude that they started with was completely different. However, and I'm going to continue, you should know that just like it's true that you need to have your mind, a pure mind, when you're doing things that are physical, which in and of themselves, they are things that are close to that yetzer, that selfishness. When we eat, right, you could, or having sex, or whatever the physical pleasure may be, right, we're edging on the place where physical pleasures are involved. So it's obviously there that you have to be careful, but it's not just there. Right? That in those places you should distance yourself from them, and so on. But similarly, that same purity of thought has to be b'masim hatovim, in the good things that we do. And here's where it really gets very, very important. And I think this is a lesson that we should all really, really take to heart, right? And that is hakrovim laboris baruch shemo, the things that are close to godliness, the things when we do a mitzvah, when we do something that we tell ourselves, this is a good thing, right? I'm going to go volunteer at this place. I'm going to go to synagogue and I'm going to pray. I'm going to go to Pesach and have a seder. I'm going to, whatever it is that you're doing that you think is part of your spiritual journey, right? Your spiritual thing. But that's the place where you really have to be careful to do it right. You have to be careful not to distance this idea from your mind. And it shouldn't be that yetzer that's telling you to do these things. This is what it means when it says doing something not for its own sake. Literally, that's the translation of shalol lishma. But what it means is shalol lishma, not for its proper purpose. Right, which is mentioned many times throughout the rabbinic literature, the idea of doing a mitzvah, but doing it not for the proper purpose of that mitzvah, right? So he's going to explain it a little more, and let's let him explain. It was explained by the rabbis already that there's lots of different types of not doing things for their own sake. Harami kulam, the worst of them all, the lowest level, is someone who a person who couldn't care less about worshiping God or doing the right thing. He doesn't even give a damn what the right thing is to do, right? But he does it because he wants to fool people. He wants people to think that I'm a holy guy. So he grows a long beard, he sits up there and he does the thing. But meanwhile, he's as a person, he's far from being a good person. So that he can collect money from people, or that everyone can honor him and sit him up in front and tell him how great of a rabbi he is, when really he's anything but. Such a person, it would have been better if his placenta spit him right back inside his mother's womb and stayed there. And so said the prophet. How did he translate it there?
They were better been strangled by his placenta.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I got it better if had he not been born at all.
Yeah, that's a little bit more polite, but
PC, right?
Yeah. But so all of Amr Hanavi v'nahi katamei kulanu ukebeged idem kol tzukosenu, that we are all one is unclean, and our tzidkos, our righteous acts are like a filthy rag, like a filthy clothing, because like the things that the mitzvos that everyone's doing, walking around, then they're shaking their lulav, but they're doing it with money they stole, or they're doing it with things that they should never have done, or they're making other people feel bad to do it, or they're doing it just for the wrong reasons. That's the worst type of lo lishma. And that we all hopefully are on the level of at least understanding there's something wrong with it. But then this is the next level. There's another type of lo lishma, of not doing a mitzvah for its own sake. Where we do it in order to get the reward, right? We're hoping to get points so that when we go upstairs after we're finished with this life, so we have some extra points on the scoreboard, maybe get us into heaven or something like that. Or you do it because somebody says, if you do this mitzvah, you're going to get rich and all your financial problems are going to go away, right? Or if you do this mitzvah, you're going to live long, or you're going to do this mitzvah and God's going to heal you from your illness. It's not quite as bad as doing it for selfish reasons, but it's still not exactly very high up there. On this, it says a person, this kind of lo lishma, the first kind of lo lishma, like I said before, that's never appropriate. This kind of lo lishma, if that's the level that you're on, if that's what you can do, fine. So do that. It's better to do it that way, even most of your life or even your whole life, because because you're at least living your life doing the proper things, even if your intention is you want to get a big lollipop at the end, right? But at least at some point, you'll come to realize, this mitzvah it's good. It's the right thing to do. Maybe you went to volunteer at some event because you wanted to get honored at the end, but then while you're doing it, you say, hey, this is actually a good thing to do. So it can actually lo lishma can come from lo lishma. So however, remember that as long as you haven't yet gotten to that level, you haven't yet realized that what you're doing is good, and as long as you're still doing it for the wrong intentions, you're still not exactly the greatest, right? You still got a lot of work to do, right? So however, mashet tzarech la'adam yoser iyon u'melacha rabba. But if you really, the thing which is necessary to do a lot more, and iyon means a lot more analysis, and self-analysis, and analysis in general, u'melacha rabba, and a lot of work, a lot of self-work. Hu ta'aroves ha'isr is the next level, is the mixing in into your intentions, the mixing in of prohibited intentions or wrong intentions. What does that mean? Often, a person goes and does a mitzvah, but really because he wants to do the mitzvah, not for any other reason. He really wants to do this. However, God told you this is what you're supposed to do, and that's what he does, and he's doing it all good. But he doesn't stop from slipping in some other motivations, right, into the thing. And he's thinking, people are going to say, everyone's going to say, look at that guy, you see what he's doing, right? Oh, he's so great, we're going to give him a big check for it because he gave such a great sermon or whatever, right? So he has the right intent, but mixed in is selfish notions. And you could think that why is it so dangerous? Who cares? So what? I mean, if he's doing it for the right reasons and he's doing a good job and he's living his life the right way, so who cares if he has? So I'll venture to say, and most of us I think would agree, but tell me if you don't. And that is that as soon as it starts, you know where it can go, right? And lots of times we see people who do start with good intentions, especially with politicians, right? People that get up there and they start off I want to change the world. I want to make the economy better so the poor people I want to start a social program or whatever it is. I have all these, I want to bring peace to the earth. And they start with good motivations, but in the back of their mind, the fact that I'll have the power to finagle things a little bit and make a few dollars and everyone will make signs to my name and everything. That's nice. It might be how it started, but you can see where it ends, right? Little by little, all the good intentions start getting less and less important, and all of the other things start getting more and more important. And that's why there's a constant effort to reach tahara, to reach this level of purity. right? Sometimes when he started, he didn't even intend on getting the reward. He really, really did it for the right reasons. But bismoach libo, the moment he's happy, ala shevach, because of the praise, right? A guy goes and he has all the right intentions and he really inspires everyone through his wonderful sermon. I don't know why that example's in my mind, but that's what I'm thinking about. And everybody's inspired and he's inspired and the inspiration is going up to heaven. And then somebody comes and says, Rabbi, that was the best speech I ever heard. Thank you so much. And then the rabbi goes, I'm a good speaker. That feels good. And the next thing you know, it's downhill, right? And here is an interesting story. The daughter of Rabbi Chanina ben Tradion. And the Gemara in Avodah Zarah criticizes her. And the way the Ramchal understands the story is interesting because the way he understands it is she was just walking down the street. He had a young daughter who was walking down the street. She was obviously pretty. And people looked at her and said, look how nice she's walking, right? She looks so pretty. And she overheard people say that she looks pretty. So as soon as she overheard people saying, she started walking a little bit more suggestively, right? So the Gemara criticizes her for that, right? Because so the way the Ramchal apparently understood this Gemara was the original walking was completely innocent, right? She was just walking, and people thought she looked good, right? But then the moment it got to her head that she looks good, there she started going downhill, right? And so Harei Tosefes Hazeh Nolad Mikoach Hashevach Sheshibchu. This additional, this slide down the wrong direction started when somebody praised her. When somebody said, doesn't she look nice? The next thing, she became involved in things that she wasn't supposed to be. So it's interesting the way the Ramchal understands that Gemara, because there's other ways to understand it, but I'm not going to go off on another Talmudic analysis right now. So even though this kind of prohibition is really tiny, it's batal b'miyat, which means, like if you have a big vat of a kosher stew and you throw one little tiny piece of non-kosher meat, it becomes batal, right? It becomes nullified, depending on the measurements, but it becomes nullified. So you might think that, so the same thing you're living a good life, you're doing the right thing, and you have the right intentions, a little bit of pride, a little bit of selfishness, a little bit of greed gets thrown in there, right? So it's kind of batal. It's like, but nonetheless, it's not really fully pure. It's not fully right. Just like when we bring on the altar a carbon mincha, a sacrifice of flour, that we don't just bring flour, but it has to be sifted, make sure all the rocks and the dirt and everything is out. That flour has to be clean and clear, 13 times sifted. There's not a single a pebble in there. It's the same thing on the proverbial altar all the way above in the heaven, right? The mitzvos that we're giving to God when we act in our lives and behave in our lives, right? What God wants is purity. The ones that are going to go up there are the choicest ones, that are pure of all of these different things. And I'm not trying to say I'm not saying that the other actions are worthless, right? Obviously, when we do things, even if we have a little self, of course, what we did was still a good deed, right? Of course, we're going to get credit, right? None of us are. How many of us are ever going to really reach tahara? How many of us are ever going to really not feel good when somebody gives us a pat on the back, right? So, God doesn't take away from anyone's reward. If you worked hard, you did something good, don't worry. Credits are there, right? But he knows the difference in level between something that's done this way or that way. But I am discussing what is the perfect worship, the perfect service of God, which is worthy of anyone who truly loves God. The only thing that can be called true, pure love for God and the resulting actions is truly pure worship or service. So the idea is to do what God wants, and that's it. No other reason. The farther you are away from this, depending on how far you are, so much is what's lacking in that mitzvah that you're doing. This is what King David meant when he said the following: Mi li vashamayim ve'imcha lo chafatzti va'aretz. Right? Who do I have in the heavens? Right? But you, God. Right? And with you, right? And because I have you, lo chavati, I have not wanted anything else in this world. So David was saying, all I want in this world is you, God. I have no other self-interest. V'yamar kamoken, he also says, Tzurufa imrascha ma'od, right? Your word is very pure. V'avdcha aheva, right? And that is why your servant loves, right, your word, because your word is pure. It's not mixed. Tzaruf is often used when you're talking about a metal, a pure metal, that like pure gold or pure silver without any contaminating metals in there. Because in truth, the real, true service of God has to be even more pure than gold and silver. That's what it says when regarding the Torah. Imros Hashem Amoros Tohoros Kesef Tzaros Balil Aretz Mizugak Vasayim. Right, the words of God, the sayings of God are pure. They are like pure silver. That are clear to the world and have been purified 7 times over. Umishahu obed Hashem be'emes. And a person who truly wants to worship God, in other words, a true person who truly wants to live a right kind of life, lo yistapek b'zebimut. He won't be satisfied when there's selfishness mixed in, right? He's not going to want to do things that are mixed in the silver with that, which is mixed with all kinds of impurities. Which is a service that is mixed in with all kinds of ulterior motivations. He's going to desire to do it right. And I think a good metaphor for this, if you think about it in a relationship, right? If a person's in a relationship with someone that they really love, right? Would you want that relation? And that's why he's emphasizing love here, because this is a way for us to understand this. Do you want to do things for the person that you love just because of what you get out of it, right? Is that why you want to be there? You may go through life and live that way, and you may go through a lot of motions. You're doing might be the right things. She wants the flowers on her birthday, so you buy her flowers. She likes this kind of food, you get it. She likes this thing, you get that. She likes this. So you're doing a lot of things that are, at least on the surface, right. But is there a difference between doing it just because you love her, and you're doing it because of what you want to get out of the relationship? Of course there's a difference. And what he's saying, the same thing here is when we live our lives worshiping God, right? Yeah, you can do it for all kinds of ulterior motives, and you might be going through the same motions. But are you doing it because you really, really love God, because you really want to do the right thing? There's a difference. There's a big difference. And how do you do that? Through love. If you have love, then you understand how you can motivate your actions properly. She'olav amru zichronam levracha. This is what's called, when doing a mitzvah, the way it was told to us, right? She'olav amru zichronam levracha. The Chazal, the rabbis taught us, kol ha'osa mitzvah k'ma'amara, a person who does a mitzvah in the way it was taught to us, ein mevaser and osa b'suros olos, and he'll never hear bad news. V'chein amru zichronam levracha, asay dvarim l'shem po'alon, do things for the sake of He who created you, right? Or, your maker, b'daber bohen lishman, and speak about them for their own sake. In other words, when we do study a mitzvah, we shouldn't be thinking about what we get out of it. We should be thinking about, why is this an important thing to do, right? And wisdom, thinking, and we're going to get in the next chapter, he's going to talk about this more, is because the way to get this, and I know it's a little spoiler here, but it's to think about what you're doing before you're doing it, and think about why you're doing it, right? If the answer is because of love, right, and the answer is because it's the right thing, then you're on the right track. But if the answer is it's the right thing, yeah, but I like what people are going to say. I like what I'm going to gain. Even if it's like, I want to get healed from this illness, and I think if I do this mitzvah, God will somehow give me a reward. It's missing something. You should do it because it's the right thing to do, and that's the only reason why we should do it. V'hinei, and that is what those who worship God with the full heart, they do. And naturally, this is what they choose. So in other words, remember, he said this is all about intention. This entire chapter is not about the action. It's about the intention behind the action. And if you truly are worshiping God, then this is the natural outcome of this, right? A person who does not attach himself to God with true love, thinking this way will be a very big pain in the neck, right? It'll be a huge burden. It'll be difficult. It'll be impossible, really. He's going to say, how could I do this, right? I'm a human being. I was born of a human being. I'll never be perfect. I'm always going to have selfish motivations, right? But if you truly love God, and you truly desire to serve Him, so then their heart becomes super overjoyed by showing, right, the truth of their love to God. Just showing an act of love makes you happy. And if you think about it in terms of relationship with another person, you can understand the idea that if you truly love someone, you're happy because you're doing these things, because you want to do things for that person, not because of whatever selfish motivations you have, but because you love them and you want to do things. And by making that person happy, you're happy, right? And that's really what it boils down to. And to gain strength, and to work harder to make it even more pure and even more refined. That's what it said before, when and your servant, right, loves it, meaning your servant, I, David, in this case, loves being this way, loves living this way, loves worshiping you in a pure way. And the truth is, if you really want to know, and I think this can really, to some degree, bring this down to earth for us, but also this is a really true test, right? How do you tell the difference, right? What's the true test, the real true test of a person who's truly worshiping God versus someone who really isn't, right? And He's just giving us the trick, right? So if you find somebody and you want to know if he or she is truly worshiping God, use this test. A person who can purify his heart more, right? And he is closer to God and more beloved. They are like the ones, like the patriarchs, the originals that came. They were especially strong and triumphant in this issue, in this manner. And all of the leaders that purified their hearts before God. All hearts are searching out God, and God knows what's going on in our hearts. God wants our heart, right? What's the intention behind what you're doing, right? That is the true test. And I think we can, obviously, if we had a little readout on everybody's forehead, that told us what their motivations are. But the truth is when we look around at people, you can think about leaders today, and it's often becomes obvious what are the motivations for what they're doing. Why are they doing that? Are they doing that because it's good, because it's the right thing, because they believe it's going to help? Or are they doing it for selfish reasons, right? And this is the test, right? A true leader is the one who does it because it's good, because it's right, because at least at the time he or she thinks this is what should be done. A person who does it with selfish motivations is the opposite. And the same thing goes in spiritual matters. if if you're looking for a spiritual guide, does he or she, why are they in this? Right? Are they in this because they want to sell you the whatever it is at the end of their website? You click on this and you buy X, whatever it is. Are they in this because they want the honor or thing? Or are they in this because they truly, truly, truly love you and want to do the right thing? Right? So Rahmana Liba Boy, God really wants is our heart. He wants our intention. Ki ein dai la'adam baruch hu b'masim levadim. It's not, God doesn't just want us our actions. A guy could do everything right. He can eat kosher with the strictest standards, right? But that's not enough. Sheyumase mitzvah, right? That should be the actions of the mitzvah. El ha'ikar lefanav. The main thing is shahalev yet tahar. The heart should be pure. Lechavein b'lavon namitis. It should intend to do the right thing. V'ini halev hu hamelach. The heart is like the king. This was believed physiologically at the time. They understood the heart to be the center of emotion and what gave the power of thought and feeling to the whole body, right? If you don't bring the heart along, then what your body does is nothing. Where the heart really wants to go, that's where your body will actually go. Well, Mikra Kasul Beferish, it says it specifically in the verse, to Noah b'ni libchali, my son, give your heart to me. And that's what God is asking for, our heart. I guess this is a good stopping point. I know we bummed out the first 15 minutes, but I don't really think I have time to do the next chapter, which I was hoping to do tonight, but we'll have plenty to do next week. Before I open the floor to comments, which I will in a second, I do want to say that next week is out because we only do this every other week. The 7th is Pesach, so we're out for that. So the next week we'll do this is in 3 weeks on April 14th. Okay? So that'll be our next week. So now the floor is open.
Sorry. I think that the boundaries are kind of blurred for me. I think that it's not so cut and dry. I think that, for example, we're talking about politicians, leaders, salespeople, whatever, where it might be debatable if their heart is really the main factor of motivation or if it's pride or ego or something else. Mm-hmm. But I think that we're all human and that we're all given these natural gifts and that does stimulate the heart. Like in the case of a politician, let's say he really, in his heart, wants to help people. He wants to help society. He wants to promote a certain bill or something that's supposed to boost the welfare of society. But he's operating in a system that's complex and with other dog-eat-dog types of personalities, a lot of political divides, a lot of, complexities, human complexities. So in order for him to succeed, he kind of has to have a little bit of those traits in himself. And he probably can identify that. Like, oh, I could kind of like in a boxing ring, a fighter, like I'm not going to go fight somebody that I'm not trained to fight. I'm going to lose, So you want some of these people, in my opinion, and just leadership, you talk in a work setting or whatever, you see that some of these people, they can go either way. They can go for good or for bad in general, but like they have certain qualities. Maybe they are a little bit egotistical. Maybe they are a little bit arrogant. Maybe they are some traits that tend to be like painted not good, but they can be helpful. Like if they channel them in the right direction, that's how you get compromise, and that's how you get negotiation, and that's how you get conversations to start.
I mean, I think I agree, like, because there are certain qualities they need, right? They need to know when the other guy's being egotistical, right? They need to be sometimes aggressive, maybe, right? They might need to be sometimes know how to wheel and deal a little bit or a lot of it, but I don't think they ever need to be egotistical. Like, I don't think they ever need to be selfish.
No, I mean, I don't think they need, but I think that it happens. They have a dose of it. Yeah, I think that
he admitted that he said that, yes, it's true that sometimes a person can have, the motivation's not be perfect and their actions could still be good. And that's fine. And you get credit for that, right? But better would be the person who's in there, right? So you might have a whole grade of leaders. Some of them are only a little bit selfish, but mostly good. Right, and some of them could be a lot of it selfish and mostly bad or all bad, right? Or who knows? They may accidentally once in a while do something good.
Well, just like, okay, think about the quality of being competitive, right? You can interpret that to be good or bad. If you're competitive, does that mean that I'm egotistical because I'm competitive? If I want to win, just for my own, that's just how I'm oriented. I like to win.
So I think that's a good example for what I was saying. In other words, you can be competitive, but not be egotistical.
Okay,
Right?
I feel like there's maybe a
not because you want to win and get the big prize, but you want to win because you want to make the world.
Like I just want to, or just you train for it. Let's just say you're an athlete and you train for the Olympics and you're competitive about it. You're like, now I'm here and I want to win. And yeah, there is glory involved. Yeah, there is pride involved. But you know, God or whomever like endowed me with these talents and this is moving my heart. I feel like I need to compete and do the best that I possibly can. And why? I mean, it doesn't matter who wins the Olympics, right? Like, I don't think that they're going to really make the world a better place, but I don't know. It's just an example.
Competitiveness, I think, does involve a certain amount of selfishness. Now, whether all selfishness is bad, you know, you have to have a little bit of selfishness to take care of yourself sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that,
and
I think
that's also in your heart, right? Like you have that in your heart sometimes, like I'm in this relationship or whatever it is. And sometimes you have to be a little bit selfish, but it's a calling in your heart too, where you're like, I've got to listen to this. I can't just silence it.
Interesting conversation. Thank you.
Yep, that's my perspective.
No, I like it. Jeff, I see a hand up. You're waiting patiently, so go ahead.
My hand's up. You call it on me, Saul?
It is up.
I would just like to note that it's a wonderful chapter to read, but in terms of the ability of humans and just thinking of myself, and like that's all I can speak to. If I think of all the decisions, my motivations over my 82 years, I don't think I could meet the standard. Certainly not as a young man, as an adult. Why did I marry my wife? Good reasons, but there was a lot of impure, as he's defining here, motivation. Why did I pursue this career? And why am I attending these classes? It's a very high standard, and I'm not a psychiatrist, but it does tend to undermine one's self-esteem when you measure it against the standard. And I just put that out there.
Well, I think you're right, but I think it's just a function of being near the end of this book, you know, because the book is progressing towards a level of perfection that very, very few human beings in history ever reached the level of perfection that we're going to find at the end of the book. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't at least be aware of these traits and strive to do the best we can. We can still learn a lot from the idea about the importance of the motivation behind what we do and not just what we actually do.
Yeah.
So I think you're 100% right, because I mean, I obviously know that, you know, when I have 15 people in the class instead of 5, it feels good, right? I mean, it's just fact. I do, you know. When I have, if I have 100 downloads, I feel better than if I have 50 downloads, you know. So, but on the other hand, to remind myself that the real motivation should be to teach, to spread Torah, to spread wisdom, to spread love, you know, and it's important to keep reminding myself, you know, and it motivates you to keep on going, even if you don't have 100 downloads, you know, because the one person that you helped, or one thing that I learned, or they learned, or we all learned, moved the world a little bit closer, you know.
Like that idea.
You know, so I think, I mean, from the beginning of this book, right, we knew that we're never going to be 100% on the level of what he's preaching, you know. And as the book progresses, these levels get higher and higher, and less of us are going to actually achieve these things. But you're right, we are human beings, but it's still so true, you know. And what he says, I couldn't help but think about politicians, but what he says about the true test of a person is looking at their motivations. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that.
I think also, though, looking at the behavioral approach that, you know, even though somebody may do an action and they're maybe the full intent wasn't there. That, if you take it from the behavioral perspective, the more they do that, the more that it will become that intrinsic
Yeah.
trait. And
Right.
so I don't think it's necessary, it's not necessarily so bad if somebody acts as if, because hopefully that will encourage them. And in fact, in therapy, you often encourage people to act as if you were
Yeah.
thinking this way.
Well, I think that's what he meant when he was talking about mitoch shelo lishma balishma. But remember, he said though that at the lowest level of lo lishma, the lowest level of doing something not for the right purpose, there is no place for that. A person that does it completely for selfish reasons, right? That's out the window. But the person that does it understands that there's good reasons to do it, but also derives benefit and pleasure from the fact that he's getting paid for it, that he's getting praised for it, that he's getting, spiritual points for it. That person can keep going and hopefully, gain more and more as he or she goes through life in their levels,
Mm-hmm.
and there, but there's a point where somebody literally does acts that look good that are truly being done for selfish reasons, trying to think of examples. There's examples where people, give donations, but they're done for completely illicit reasons,
Like tax write-off.
Yeah.
Instead of
Well,
actually.
I mean, the tax write-off would be true, but if they do it, there's all kinds of crazy reasons why people do things that outwardly look good but are truly just selfish.
Mm-hmm.
But a person that's a normal person who has a mix of it all, that makes sense, a lot of sense.
So I'd say that the only thing I agree, I think it's really helpful to know people's intentions. But I think the way that it usually plays out in the real world is you can't always know their true intentions. And you do have to judge people on their behavior usually, that's just how it works. I can't sit down and have therapy, with everybody who does a bad thing or something that's really harmful, or like, I'm not really sure. It's just too much to have to analyze all that, or it's not going to happen. So it's like, unfortunately, I have learned the hard way oftentimes to just hold people according to their behavior. What they say, take it as, what it just don't give that. I mean, you want a balance between giving people the benefit of the doubt and also just taking things at face value. So
what's interesting is that because I said this, but I'm backtrack a little bit, because when he says the true test, I don't think he means the way we test other people. I think he means the way we test ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think you're right.
Judge not.
I can't judge everyone.
I try not to, but
sometimes
I have to judge people.
Yeah.
How am I supposed to
There are
operate?
times when you see other people enough, and them enough, that you know that they're always choosing the selfish route. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So sometimes it's obvious. But most of the time, especially with people that you have like a less time relationship with, you don't know their motivation. You're right.
Yeah.
I think he's much more focused because he doesn't directly say because it's not really our business necessarily to judge everyone else.
Yeah, I don't think it addresses that as much as saying really like work to your own. Like the whole exercise is talking about self-improvement.
Yeah, test yourself. Why am I doing this?
Why?
And figure out what the answer is. And that's how you test your own level.
Mm-hmm.
Any other things? Because I think we can sign out, and then I'm looking forward to continuing. We'll have like I said, I guess it's the 14th of April. We'll be back to learn how to become pure.
Yes. Oh, wow. We're gonna have to wait till then.
Yes. All right. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
You're welcome.